Today on Inside Utah Politics, social media and children. As lawmakers look to restrict or even ban access, we're looking into the impact it has on kids with a parenting expert. And the origins of COVID taking center stage in the nation's capital, as Energy Department officials say it may have been leaked from a Chinese lab.
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics. We do begin this morning with Dr. Elisa Van Langeveld, adjunct professor at the University of Utah and parenting expert, here to discuss the impact of social media on children. So glad to have you with us. Thanks so much for making time for us.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
This is really a big conversation right now. That's why I wanted to bring you on the show to provide your perspective, because we have lawmakers at both the federal and the state level making these proposals as how the government can step in and regulate social media. We have anything from all-out bans on kids proposed to, putting it more into the parents' hands and making sure that they are on board with this. So first off, I really want to get into the impact of social media. You say there are good and bad, so let's start with the bad right off top. What is the biggest concern you have when it comes to children and social media?
Thank you. I'm really excited to talk about this topic, and I'm excited to see our legislators and our policymakers paying attention to what the research is showing for adolescents. And what the research is showing is that the use of social media is really hard and has a lot of negative outcomes. And it actually can have negative outcomes in all domains of development, meaning there are physical outcomes, cognitive, intellectual outcomes, emotional and social emotional outcomes. So it's this tool that we have in our lives that brings with it a lot of risks, but it has a potential to be doing a lot of good. And so we then, as the grown-ups, need to figure out how do we help our children use this tool in a way that minimizes those risks and really capitalizes on the benefits.
Okay, we will dig into that more. Let's first focus in on some of the negative impacts it can have. Let's start with mental health.
All right, so during adolescence, the developmental task that our youth are going through is trying on a lot of identities and figuring out what their role and their sense of self is. And so when they have a high level of exposure to highly curated and crafted messaging in social media, it can really interrupt their own sense of self, their own sense of themselves in the world. We talk about in psychology this idea of an I self and a me self, how I see myself and how I think you see me. And our brains are just really not developed to such an extent that we are able to balance all of these external likes, comments, criticisms from all around us at the same time. So we're asking our children when they go into these social media worlds to kind of be on stage and receive all this external criticism or support and then to perform for it. What types of posts can I post in order to have those likes? And then is that who I am?
Right, and then there's also this element where you see your friends all together having this great time and you weren't there.
Yeah.
What kind of role can that play?
That can have a really isolating role. And in the world that we grew up in, without this level of social media, we weren't aware of what everyone was doing 24 hours a day. So there was much less of a sense of that fear of missing out. And that's really prevalent.
Yeah. What about social skills? What type of impact does it have when you're so deep into social media and not really having that personal interaction? How can that impact a child?
So the social skills come in two different ways. First of all, we learn a different set of social skills online. How do we actually talk to people online? As a university professor, the way students talk to me or email me has changed in the last 15 years. The way they use punctuation, the way they address me or don't, the way they close their emails or don't. So we have these social skills that we learn in the online space. But then we have these social skills that we learn or fail to learn in the personal space. So are we a group of teenagers who are all looking down on our phones, or are we actually looking up and engaging with eye contact and recognizing nonverbal signs of if somebody's doing poorly? Are we just so engaged with our phone that we're actually not practicing those social skills in real time?
And I noticed that you'll have someone you interact with, you're friends with, you're following on social media, but then maybe you'll see them in person and there's something that keeps you from actually interacting with them in person.
Yeah, so being in an online space creates one level of distance. It's almost as if we're always using nonverbal communication. We're always a little bit distanced from people. So then when we're face-to-face, one-on-one, it might feel a little bit foreign and it might feel a little unfamiliar, but really that's how we want to live our lives.
Okay, what else do we need to talk about when it comes to the impact on children?
Some of the negative impacts. What I really want to emphasize is that there's kind of two pieces here. There is the presence of a risk when we hand our kids a smartphone when they are online, but there is also a missed opportunity cost. What are our youth missing because they're spending hours and hours and hours online? Is it the one-on-one social interaction? Is it time to self-assess? Who am I? What am I into? Am I going to go outside? Am I going to pick up a sport? Do I want to practice more music? Do I want to read? But there's an opportunity cost to the time spent online, as well as the present risks that come when we start engaging in smartphones and engaging online.
Let's move into some of the positive impacts. Where do we start there?
Okay, so first, we do see some really meaningful positive impacts that come with social connections for children who feel left out in the communities where they live. So children who might feel like they're being bullied at school or there's nobody at school that is like them, children in the LGBTQI+ community, that they can go into these online spaces and they can find people that are similar to them or have similar ideas to them, and that can feel really validating. That's a positive. We also, as I work at the university, and a lot of what I do is online, where my university students are coming in and they're taking full university classes online. So the skill to be able to use electronics and media for adult life is starting in our adolescence. So some of the benefits, these are life skills. Helping our children understand how to create relationships online, maintain relationships online, receive assignments and education online, and be accountable online are life skills that we can start in adolescence so that when they come to the university at 18 or 19 and they sign up for my online class, they are able to do that and know how to communicate with me, how to find things online, and know how to have those online engagements. So I don't think we need to say, don't get online until you're a grown-up, but I do think we as parents and as the grown-ups around us need to help prepare our children so they can use this tool that's a really fantastic tool for their adult life.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about the legislation we're seeing. On the federal level, we see Representative Chris Stewart of Utah. He's proposing an all-out ban for anyone under the age of 16, says they just shouldn't be on media, social media altogether. Here at the state level, we have a couple of bills that are moving through the state legislature. They're looking more at putting control into the hands of parents and really targeting the algorithms that are targeting children. What do you make of the legislation you're seeing on the table?
I feel excited that the conversation is starting, and I feel excited that we're starting to look at what the research shows, and that not accessing social media until age 16 is very well supported in the research. It makes sense that that is a guideline that we're looking for. Some things that concern me in the legislation are maybe the unintended consequences of the mechanism for doing that. Some concerns such as if the online companies are required to verify the age of a child, we are then going to have to disclose a lot of private information, which is something that active parents are telling their kids not to do. Don't put private information like your age or your birthday online. So there are some privacy issues there in those mechanisms. But so what I am excited about is that we're having this conversation. It's definitely a problem and an opportunity for us to create some policies that can support children. I'm concerned about some of the mechanisms and the unintended consequences that might occur.
Okay, we've talked a lot about the role of parents in this situation. So let's go ahead and get into that. What tools do parents need to have to effectively guide their children into more of this positive that you talk about in social media?
Excellent. So when we are trying to prepare our children for something that might be risky, there's kind of 3 stages. Well, there's 4 stages. Okay. First, we start at like a cocooning stage where we just protect our children. They have no access. And this would be in the early years, ages 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, no access to social media. And then we start moving into an awareness stage. So in the early teen years, our kids know about social media, and parents should be involved talking to them about them. How do I use social media as your mom? Let's watch some TikToks together. And then we start moving into an avoidance stage. You know that it's there, and you might be interested, but we're going to avoid that until we're at a certain age, 13, 14, 15, 16. And then we move into the preparation stage. I have now prepared you so that when you get online, you're going to be prepared what to do when things start to feel really bad, or you find content that makes you feel really uncomfortable or is inappropriate. But we kind of are preparing our children throughout their lives so that they enter adulthood knowing how to use these tools.
Those can be some tough conversations to have at times, especially when you talk about the content that isn't suitable for children. They may not want to come to their parents for that. So any tips on how to maybe break the ice there?
Yes, this should be an ongoing conversation. As with so many other things that we ask and want parents to talk to their children about, alcohol use, substance use, sexual activity. And the goal that we're looking for, particularly in adolescence, is what's called spontaneous self-disclosure, which means parents aren't grilling and interrogating their children, but they have multiple opportunities where they are having conversations with their children and they're checking in about their online activity so that when something happens, they're ready to have those conversations. It's ongoing, it's continual.
Okay, that makes sense. Really fascinating conversation, and I appreciate your insight. Very helpful. Thanks for being here with us this morning.
Thank you. It's an important topic.
It is, no doubt. Thanks so much. Okay, still to come. As communities say no to high-density housing, one group is saying bring it on. Why they want to welcome new neighbors a little later. But first, congressional Democrats renewing their pledge to protect reproductive rights across the country. The latest push they are supporting and why Republicans are opposed. Welcome back. Questions about the origins of COVID are swirling on Capitol Hill after U.S. Energy Department officials suggest it may have been leaked from a Chinese lab. Now lawmakers are calling for a deeper investigation. Hannah Brandt with the latest from Washington.
There's new finger pointing about how the coronavirus pandemic started.
There's a considerable dispute as to whether COVID came from a wet market or came from the lab.
This week, officials with the U.S. Energy Department reportedly determined with low confidence that the virus came from a lab leak in Wuhan, China, a finding the Biden administration isn't ready to confirm.
There is not a consensus right now in the U.S. government about exactly how COVID started.
Originally, top government officials, including Dr. Anthony Fauci, dismissed the lab leak theory.
Americans across the country were ridiculed and vilified for having a difference of opinions.
In response to this report, China accused the U.S. of trying to politicize the virus and says they've been open and transparent about its origins.
There is nothing political about this. This is a question of national security.
Intelligence agencies say they're committed to finding a concrete answer about COVID's origins,
So that we can better prevent a future pandemic.
but some lawmakers, like Congressman John Joyce, argue the American people deserve more than answers.
They deserve accountability for the hardships that this virus, unleashed by the Chinese Communist Party, has allowed to occur.
In Washington, I'm Hannah Brandt.
Democrats renewing their push for the Equal Rights Amendment as a way to also protect reproductive rights. But opponents argue that effort would harm the very women they hope to defend. Washington correspondent Jesse Tenor reports on this week's Senate Judiciary Committee hearing.
What kind of America do we want to leave our daughters and granddaughters?
As the Equal Rights Amendment returned to the Senate for debate Tuesday, Illinois Democrat Dick Durbin said the Supreme Court's decision to end the federal right to abortion gives the effort extra importance.
For the first time in history, to take away a constitutional right from every woman in America.
Democrats argue the ERA would enshrine the rights of women and LGBTQ individuals in the U.S. Constitution, thereby protecting reproductive rights as a whole. But Mississippi Republican Cindy Hyde-Smith said the ERA would remove protections for the unborn.
And instead re-empower unelected judges to impose a radical abortion policy.
Hyde-Smith warned her colleagues the ERA would also have broader impacts on safety.
Locker rooms, prisons, hospital rooms, domestic violence shelters, and restrooms would allow men into areas where women should feel safe and protected.
But not all Republicans oppose the effort.
Women should have equal treatment to men under the law.
Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski said even though women make up half the U.S. population, only 25% of the Senate is female, and women still earn less money than their male counterparts.
We still have a long ways to go, and I think that we need the Equal Rights Amendment to get there.
Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer has promised a floor vote within the coming months. In Washington, I'm Jesse Tenor.
Still ahead, yes, in my backyard. Why one group is trying to change the mindset of many Utahns after the break.
You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
We've talked a lot about NIMBYism on this show when it comes to development and affordable housing. Now a new group is trying to turn the tables on that attitude. Turner Bitton is with SLC Neighbors for More Neighbors. Turner, welcome to the show. Great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Really, this has been a big topic of conversation the last couple of years when you talk about high density and making housing more readily available and affordable. So when I heard about your group, it really caught my attention. I wanted to have you on. First off, talk about how this all started. Give us some background on your group.
Yeah, so our origin story starts with the Planning Commission in May of last year. And at the, I can't remember the exact date, but it was mid-May of last year, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on affordable housing incentives. And at that meeting, you had an entire group of people ranging across the ideological spectrum that showed up to talk about how bad the affordable housing incentives were. And I was in Switzerland at the time, texting folks back here in the States. We were all pretty much raging at what was happening. And we decided that the conversation on affordable housing in Salt Lake City was completely broken, and we wanted to put together a group that could bring together the interests to advocate for affordable housing and housing of all types, because quite frankly, we just need to address the supply side of housing so badly in our city.
Yeah, and it's unbelievable the way we've seen it just skyrocket in just the last couple of years. We talked a little bit about that before we started this segment. You have some ideas on how to accomplish that mission that you talk about, and one of the main pieces to this recipe, so to speak, if you will, is an accessory dwelling unit, or an ADU. We heard that term quite a bit. Talk about why you see that as a crucial solution to this problem.
Yeah, so we see ADUs as an important piece of the solution to solving the affordable housing crisis. The interesting thing about ADUs, and the reason that they're such an important piece of this, is that they're easy to do. Or they should be easy to do, but oftentimes zoning and other restrictions get in the way, which is something we're working on right now, trying to get the Salt Lake City Council to approve some policy proposals before them. But the thing that's important about ADUs is the benefits of them far outweigh any cost. And so for most ADUs, when you look at more developed markets for ADUs across the country, they generally rent, on average, about 40% below market rate in terms of rentals. And what that means is that they are an opportunity creator, that folks that want to live in high opportunity neighborhoods can often do so, can get that start through an ADU. But the benefits are more than financial. So the main motivator for folks building ADUs are often social in nature. It's to provide housing for a loved one, to make a little bit of rental income, to subsidize income, or to provide a place for an adult with a disability or a college student. And so it becomes a very gentle way of increasing density in a neighborhood and unlocking opportunity in that neighborhood.
Let's talk a little bit more about what an ADU is, because it really can take a lot of different forms. Give us some examples of what we're seeing in the market now.
Yeah, so there's two types. There's the attached ADU, which means that it's part of your home, finishing a basement and adding an entrance, repurposing a garage into a rental unit. And then there's the more common, which are the backyard ADUs. So that would be building a little home behind your existing home. I live here in the Glendale neighborhood, where we have small homes and large lots. And so there's an opportunity there to add an additional unit. You can often see these above garages, repurposed sheds. There's a whole host of ways that ADUs present themselves in neighborhoods.
You brought up the idea of zoning reform and saying that's something that is an important component of this. We are starting to see this talked about at the capital city level with Salt Lake City, but talk about what you think still needs to be done when it comes to zoning, and particularly why it's important when we're talking about these ADUs.
Yeah, so what Salt Lake City is proposing is changing a whole host of the policies that govern ADUs. So one of those is allowing for a larger ADU. Being able to build a little bit bigger of a building. Currently, they're limited at only several hundred square feet, and we should take advantage of the land that we have in the city, the limited land that we have in the city, by increasing the size of units that are able to be built. The thing that my group is focusing on right now is the owner occupancy requirement. So let's imagine that you own a home here in the city and you want to build an ADU, but you might not live in that home. Let's say that it was your mom's house, that maybe she's passed away, and you own a second property, and you want to build an ADU maybe to provide an additional house and a little bit more income by renting out to a student. Under Salt Lake City's code right now, you cannot do that. And this gets in the way, fundamentally, of producing more ADUs. So we've heard a lot from our elected leaders about how they view ADUs as very important. Well, if that is true, then we need to eliminate all the barriers that are in the way of building more ADUs. And owner occupancy, so when you look at California and you look at other developed ADU markets, removing the owner occupancy requirement resulted in more ADUs being built. And we should fundamentally want that for our city.
When it comes to zoning, are you laser focused on ADUs, or do you see other opportunities that could be achieved as well?
So we're looking at ADUs right now because that's in front of the council, but as an organization, we're also interested in upzoning the entire city. So when you look at what Minneapolis has done and Portland has done, they've essentially upzoned their entire city. They've gone from a default single-family zone to allowing for duplexes and triplexes. What's funny about Salt Lake City is that's going back to the future in a way. Prior to the 1990s, Salt Lake City allowed duplexes and triplexes in almost every area of the city. Now it would be illegal to do that in most areas of the city. When you look at places like the Avenues or Central City or Liberty Wells, these are areas that are defined by that neighborhood scale density, those duplexes, those triplexes, all this weird mix of buildings that allow for density while still preserving that sense of neighborhood.
Focusing on Salt Lake City, but obviously there are many suburbs in the Salt Lake Valley and then up and down the Wasatch Front. Is this something you would want to extend beyond the capital city as well?
So our work is focused right now on Salt Lake City. What we want to do is get Salt Lake City to be the model that other cities can follow. And certainly that there is a role here for the state in helping make this possible. So I would commend the state. In the last couple of years, they've moved towards standardizing the way that cities deal with ADUs. Looking at California a few years ago eliminated owner occupancy requirements, made it much easier statewide to build ADUs. So certainly something we're interested in.
You bring up something that a lot of people might not think about, and that is the impact that school closures can have on housing. Talk about that dynamic.
So this is another campaign we have right now. Salt Lake City School District is looking at closing up to 14 schools. They've got a list of 14 schools that have enrollment shortages. And that's fundamentally because families can't afford to live in Salt Lake City anymore. So we're seeing families move out of areas like Glendale and into Kearns, into Tooele, where you can get a larger home at a more affordable price. What we want Salt Lake City School Board to do as they look at closing schools is to evaluate the ones that might make a good fit for transitioning to housing. And so let's take in my neighborhood here, Parkview Elementary. It's one of the elementaries that's on the potential closure list. It sits on the 9-line trail. It's walking distance to a grocery store. It's on our bus line here in Glendale. That could potentially be a great spot for the district to leverage its position as a landowner and say, hey, we're going to put up this land, we're going to partner with Salt Lake City's redevelopment agency, but we want to see 3-bedroom houses. We want to see housing for our retirees and for our educators. We're willing to put the land up, but in exchange, we want to see this type of development pattern.
We see so many times, especially when we're talking about high density, but even in areas like this where people don't want to see this happening in their neighborhood. Why are you coming out and saying, yes, we do want to see this in our neighborhood?
Because this is better for neighborhoods. Our city is better and stronger when we welcome anyone who wants to live here. We have a vibrant travel industry. We have a vibrant hospitality industry. I love living in Salt Lake because of all of our restaurants. But we're facing a crisis where the people who sustain those industries can't live in the city that they work in. So I'm 32 years old. I bought my first house by a miracle 10 years ago. I've been able to leverage that, and I'm now in my third home here in Glendale. But it took me 3 tries to get to Salt Lake. I am very worried that I will be the last of my friend group that's able to buy a home in Salt Lake City. I've got friends that live in Eagle Mountain and drive to Salt Lake City every day for work. They're sustaining our city, but they're not able to take part in living here. And I think the thing that is very fundamental about the work that we're trying to do is we want a city that has a diversity of incomes, a diversity of people, and all kinds of backgrounds to really contribute to the vibrant city that Salt Lake City is.
Okay, we'll have to end it on that note. Fascinating conversation, and we will keep an eye on how your mission goes in the coming months. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break. We leave you now with a look at what's on the radar in the world of politics. Governor Cox is reviewing legislation passed by the state legislature and has until Thursday, March 23rd to take action. The final day to begin a veto override session is Tuesday, May 2nd. And this year is a municipal election year. The primary is set for Tuesday, August 15th. Make sure to connect with me on social media and through email. Let me know what's on your mind and what issues are important to you. You can email me at InsideUtahPolitics@abc4.com. You can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Thanks so much for making us part of your Sunday morning. We hope to see you again next week as we go Inside Utah Politics.